All you need to know is that the name of the show is Blank Check.
This guy hits the ground running. I would argue he's sort of a very unique phenomenon in Hollywood. He is a comedy director who comes out of animation and has a very, very distinctive style, making very personal, esoteric films on a big studio level, and they work in their commercial. His name is Timothy Burton.
Timothy Walter Burton.
He's this weird bouillabaisse of all his cultural influences growing up, a lot of weird, pulpy, trashy stuff. And he made these things very mainstream, even though people didn't have the reference base for the stuff that he grew up on. And you compare him within the realm of directors like this to someone like Edgar Wright, where it took like 5 movies for one of his films to be successful. Burton hit so quickly. A big cult surprise success. He's a guy I grew up idolizing. I think for a lot of people of our generation,
he's one of the first directors
he's a
you
starter
recognize.
kit auteur, where you're like, I get that these movies are all made by one person.
Exactly.
But the thing with Tim Burton is, I think everyone knows what Tim Burton's backstory is because it's what you extrapolate from watching his movies.
Live people ignore the strange and unusual. I myself am strange and unusual.
You look like a regular girl to me.
He grew up in like Burbank. He was a weird, dark kid. He was obsessed with TV. With TV, you get an onslaught of non-curated media. And he is, by all accounts, like an omnivore. He's watching martial arts films, and he's watching monster movies, Roger Cormansley's genre pictures.
I feel very lucky to have dangerous material to go through when you're young.
Synthesized all of these things into his being and all his weird hang-ups and his aesthetic obsessions. And he sort of feels like a guy who isn't a student of film as much as he's like a student of pop culture.
Most of the time, I don't know what he's talking about.
Makes all these films in his backyard, is really good visual artist, and goes to CalArts to become an animator.
At CalArts, the student will be educated in the sciences and humanities, but will spend most of his time in the development of artistic talents.
And is contemporaries with all the Pixar guys. There's a class photo you can find of the A113 class where he's there with Brad Bird and John Lasseter putting his hands on everyone's legs. At that point, CalArts is just a pipeline for Disney, but this is the nadir of Disney animation. Even when Disney was at like a low point, it still was kind of a talent incubator to develop voices.
Hi, Tim.
This is Tim Burton, another one of our people here. I'm crushing his drawings.
He was pitching them features, he was coming up with concepts, and they were like, we can't make this, we can't make this. Nightmare Before Christmas was one of them at that point in time. Too twisted. We don't know what to do with him.
The first film I worked on was called Fox and the Hound. That's where I first did some. Yeah. And all of my foxes looked like they'd been hit by cars. So.
Tim, you've got such talent. Bye, Tim.
So after a little while, they were like, we're just gonna give you money, make something. So they give him a little money to make a short film called Vincent. It is the ultimate urtext.
It's basically the story of a little boy who thinks that he's Vincent Price.
And his life is totally normal. He lives in a very sweet place with nice parents, and he can't stop fantasizing about being in a gothic horror film. And his mom keeps on interrupting him, telling him to take out the garbage.
And it comes from my childhood experiences.
It's so visually striking, very influenced by German Expressionist films. It's stark black and white. It's these insane angles.
I really responded to his torment and anguish and insanity.
And that sort of puts him on the map. So Disney's so impressed with that they give him some money to make a live-action short film. And he makes Frankenweenie. And they look at it, it stars Shelley Duvall and Daniel Stern. It slaps so fucking hard.
Fucks and slaps, huh?
And they're like, this is too twisted. So they pull it. They don't release this film. But in this early era of like, here, we got the VHS tape and it makes the rounds, it starts traveling around Hollywood. So now we go to the parallel track, which is Paul Rubens.
And Paul Rubens.
Paul Rubens is a Groundlings guy. It becomes one of those places like Second City where if Lorne Michaels is scouting for talent, he's going to the Groundlings once a year to see who their best people are. Paul Rubens is heavily in contention. Goes through all the auditions, goes through the test, is the last guy cut, doesn't make it. And he is really burned and bitter about the whole thing. So Paul Rubens is like, fuck it, I don't need SNL, I'm gonna make my own luck. And they were doing a Groundling show where the bit was the worst stand-up comedians. And he creates this character who's this weird guy with the voice and with a couple of catchphrases.
Hi, everybody. My name's Pee-wee. What's yours? well, like the man said I've only been doing stand-up for a couple of weeks now, so I hope you don't mind. Tonight I'm going to be tape recording my act, and this way when I get home I get some sort of an idea of how good I did, okay?
It kills at this one Groundling show, and he decides, I'm going to build a Pee Wee Herman show. I'm going to do like an old 50s style TV show as Pee Wee Herman. It'll be like a howdy doody kind of thing.
Your bark, get ready, get set, now go, 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 because it's time now for the Pee Wee Herman Show!
They do it at the Groundlings, it blows up, it becomes a phenomenon, they move it to the Roxy Theater, HBO films it, and then Pee Wee just becomes a public figure. But it's like as Pee Wee, it's not Paul Reubens.
Welcome, Pee Wee Herman.
People thought that was his real name. It's like, where is the separation here? Like, who the fuck is this guy? And David Letterman said, what makes me laugh about Pee Wee Herman is that it has the external structure of a bratty little precocious kid, but you know it's being controlled by the incubus, the manifestation of evil itself.
I've seen that quote. It's very funny.
Where I was like, that's the best distillation I've heard of the Pee Wee Herman thing. Warner Brothers saw the Pee Wee thing catching on. This was a time where people still took flyers on things. I think especially post Cheech and Chong, where they would still do this sometimes. Warner Brothers just goes, yeah, Pee Wee, make a movie. He brings on Phil Hartman, his buddy from the Groundlings. They bring on Burton because he liked Frankenweenie.
He sees Frankenweenie and probably thinks like, right, this is
a match.
In the same zone that I'm playing.
The same references, the same sort of pitch of humor.
And I went to Warner Brothers and we said, Tim Burton. And they wouldn't send him the script, so my manager sent him the script and he agreed the same day.
But Burton builds this perfect world around him. Even just from black title screen and the Elfman score sounds like anarchy. This is what Pee Wee Herman sounds like. I remember watching this as a child when the Rube Goldberg is making the breakfast and the music was so alarming. I was like, what's about to go wrong?
Right.
Like, I couldn't imagine that the breakfast would be successfully executed because I was like, the house is going to catch on fire.
Makes like a pancake face.
But what's interesting about Pee Wee Herman is there is no game inherent to him.
No.
Unlike most sketch characters.
Almost what's so baffling about him if you've never seen him before. You're like, what's the joke?
He's not making fun of a type of person we know because there's no one like him. Wayne's World, which is like the other most successful sketch to movie adaptation, the characters are a circumstance. It's a type of person. Because it's based in reality, you can write the human versions of them.
It begins with Wayne being like, so I'm Wayne and I host a TV show in my basement. And you're like, right, like in the sketch.
Excellent.
And Pee Wee Herman is like, I'm a fucking lunatic. I live in like a cartoon house in a cartoon town.
I have no job.
I have no job. God knows how any of this works.
Yes.
I wrap tape around my face in the morning and scream. Like...
You're never prepared until you've done one of these things. It's like an out-of-body or death experience. I mean, who's to say what it's like when you die?
Burton, because he comes out of animation, you really learn visual storytelling. And for a guy who's as stylish as he is, he's not manic. There's a very sort of deliberate shot sequencing.
I'm trying to use the phone! Barely touched them!
But you go, okay, so what's the logical bit here now? The bit is either like he appeals to them and does something that would show that he's a real biker, or he tries to intimidate them and pretend to be a tough guy.
Wins a race, something like this.
Right, he's gonna exist within their world. No, he asked the busboy silently for his wedge heels.
Yep.
Puts tequila on the jukebox.
Yep.
Stands up on the table, and then just does this very joyous dance.
Yep.
And it is kind of the movie in a microcosm where you're like, why are the bikers falling for this? Because who wouldn't fall for this? This is charming.
Break dance!
And that's where like Burton's really keyed in as a comedic filmmaker, is the stuff that isn't on the page, but that he knows like, what will make the sequence work is having those reactions be just precise, having the wind-up of the sequence be really tense and all of that sort of stuff. In terms of the effect he has on people, positions Pee Wee as something of like a Paddington or an intern character who like magically changes people's lives. It's just energy. It speaks to these two guys being in the right position. I don't think Tim Burton could make this movie today. I don't think he could have made it 10 years later. The two of them were really synced in with each other and with the culture and all of that.
And they make this movie and it's inexplicably wonderful.
Paul Reubens said, I see this character connecting with kids now because of the movie. He makes Pee-wee's Playhouse, but they also start developing Big Top Pee-wee, and they offer it to Burton, and he passes because he's read a script that Warner Brothers, Geffen, have had lying around for a little while, and takes to it with a lot of new visual ideas. And that script, of course, famously is called House Ghosts.
It's showtime.
From Pee-wee on, all the characters are characters I identify with and are very personal to me. The movies look so ridiculous and look so absurd and cartoony that some of that gets lost a little bit sometimes. But for me, they mean quite a lot, you know.
And thus, film history is made.
I don't know. What do you think, Ben?
I love Rube Goldberg machines.
Yeah.
Sure.
Find yourself in a situation you're telling some kind of like long drawn out story and you realize just toward the end, this has no punchline, or I have nowhere to go, or this isn't going to be funny, or this is you had to be there kind of situation. You wait one beat after you end and then you go, I love that story. And you're out. You are out.